Rob Averill, did I give you 3 pieces of paper with my notes? Did I give you a photocopy of a poem? Could I have it, please? I suddenly found there was a page of my notes missing, and I didn't want to end up preaching a shorter sermon for you, so... It's a poem. It's a poem about what happened on the 13th of February, 1692. Because the Campbells, a clan in Scotland, went to Glencoe to visit the MacDonalds. The MacDonalds welcomed them with open arms. They had a feast together. They roasted the ox. They poured out the wine. They would have played their bagpipes. They would have danced. And then they went to sleep. Oh, cruel is the snow that sweeps Glencoe and covers the graves of Donald. Oh, cruel was the foe that raped Glencoe and murdered the house of MacDonald. They came in a blizzard, we offered them heat, a roof over their heads, dry shoes for their feet. We wined them and dined them, they ate of our meat, and they slept in the house of MacDonald. They came from Fort William with murder in mind. The Campbells had orders King William had signed. Put all to the sword, these words underlined, and leave none alive called MacDonald. They came in the night while the men were asleep. This band of Argyles through snow soft and deep. Like murdering foxes among helpless sheep, they slaughtered the house of MacDonald. Some died in their beds at the hand of the foe. Some fled in the night and were lost in the snow. Some lived to accuse him who struck the first blow, but gone was the house of MacDonald. Oh, cruel is the snow that sweeps Glencoe and covers the graves of Donald. Oh, cruel was the foe that raped Glencoe and murdered the house of MacDonald. Well, you know the story. And you know that the shame, the horror, was that these people were welcomed as friends. They were entertained as friends. They were given hospitality, and they got up and killed the MacDonalds. It wasn't simply that they attacked from a distance, but they came, they sat down and ate and drank with them like friends. Now, sharing a meal is very important. When we share a meal with someone, when we invite people around, we're treating them as friends. This is why we tend to celebrate at Christmas time with a meal, at birthday times with a meal. Eating a meal with someone is very important. It's a sign not just of hospitality, but of friendship. And this is much more so in the Middle East. When I lived and worked in Israel, I remember walking down through the dusty side streets of Nazareth, and a lady who worked in the hospital saw me and called me in, and I had to go in, I had to sit down, and I had to eat a little bowl of food. It was a bit of a cross between grass and spinach, and it was soaked in oil, so I wasn't sure whether it was grass or not. But I had to eat it. She was incredibly poor, but she had to give something to me and treat me as a guest, and I had to eat it. It would have been very rude. It would have been offensive not to, because eating a meal in the Middle Eastern culture is very symbolic. It means such a lot. And we've got to understand that when we come to look at the communion service, the Lord's Supper, here in Mark chapter 14, verses 12 onwards. If we don't understand the importance and significance of just sitting down and having a meal with someone, we will never understand the horror that one of the people eating the meal with Jesus Christ betrayed him, and betrayed him at the meal. It was horrific beyond words. It was just totally despicable. We will never understand the horror that he who shared my bread has lifted up his heel against me, as the psalmist prophesied. Also, if we don't understand the significance of eating a meal together, we'll never really understand the importance of taking communion together. We take communion as a family. It's a commitment not only of our relationship to Jesus Christ, but of our friendship with each other. We are friends together. Well, back in the days of Jesus Christ, if there was someone and there was friction and you were divided from them and you wanted to heal the relationship, you wouldn't write them a letter. You wouldn't send them a present. You wouldn't do things like that. What you would do is you would invite them to a meal with you. That was handing out your hand. You would invite them to a meal, and then they had the choice. If they accepted the invitation to eat with you, then they were saying, we're reconciled. If they didn't accept the invitation, then they're saying, no, we're not reconciled. I can't be your friend. But if you ate together, you ate together as friends. If you weren't friends, you didn't eat together. And at Passover time, when they ate together, they were not merely eating together as friends, but the lamb was slaughtered for the household. You ate together as family. You were not just friends, you were family when you ate together at Passover time. And that is the meal that Jesus celebrated with his disciples on the night he was betrayed, the day before he was crucified. We have three sections. The first section, verses 12 to 15, tells us the importance of the meal. The middle section, verses 17 to 21, tells us the importance of examining ourselves, of eating with humility. And the final section, verses 22 to 26, gives us the explanation, tells us that we've got to eat with understanding. So first of all, verses 12 to 16, we look at the importance of the meal. The last meal that Jesus Christ ate with his disciples. Actually, it was the last meal that he ate at all. That makes it significant, doesn't it? But Jesus had so much that he wanted to communicate to his disciples, that he wanted to eat this meal with them. He had so much to say. Here in Mark's Gospel, we have 8 verses. In John's Gospel, we have 5 chapters of what happened at this meal, what Jesus was saying and teaching his disciples. It was so important. This was his last meal, his last time to get together with them and teach them the things that are so important that they had to understand. So it was very important for Jesus Christ simply because it was his last meal. But it was important also because it was a symbolic meal. It was the Passover meal where they remembered their history. You remember the Passover story. The Hebrews were slaves in Egypt. The plagues had been coming, and now it had reached its peak. And this night the angel of death was going to pass through the land, and the firstborn of every family was going to be struck dead, unless they sacrificed a lamb. And they got the blood of the sacrificed lamb and they put that around the entrance to the dwelling place. And it wasn't enough simply that the lamb had died and the blood had been put around the dwelling place. They all had to go under the blood into the house and shelter there. And then that night, the angel of death would come through the land, but the Lord would see the blood pass over the houses, and the people would be protected. They would be saved. And every year the Passover meal was a reenactment of that story as they were putting themselves back there and saying, we were the ones who were saved. And the meal was symbolic. The details of the meal were symbolic. The lamb was symbolic. It pointed to the sacrifice, that the animal had to die instead of them. Its blood had to be shed so that they could be saved. They would eat the lamb with unleavened bread. That was bread that didn't have any yeast, that didn't rise. It was bread that was made quickly. You would have to leave leaven for a day or two so that the bread would rise. But they would eat it with unleavened bread to show that God was going to save them rapidly. Their deliverance was so close that bread didn't have time to rise. So they would eat the lamb with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs, to remind them that they were being saved from slavery, the bitterness, the misery of their life that they were being saved from. And they'd have a kind of puree, a darkish red puree that would remind them of the mud bricks that as slaves they made day in and day out, year in and year out, slaving their back-breaking work as slaves in Egypt. And they would celebrate this meal that would remind them of their deliverance. It celebrated the old covenant when under Moses' leadership, God rescued his people from slavery in Egypt and brought them to freedom. But it didn't only look back. It also pointed forward to the Messiah who was going to come. There was a greater deliverance still to come. And the Passover looked forward to the Messiah coming to deliver his people in the future. Well, Jesus wanted to eat this meal with his disciples, but Judas was planning to betray Jesus and have him arrested. But Jesus was determined that Judas would not stop him eating this meal with his disciples. So Jesus secretly organized where the Passover would be celebrated, so that Judas couldn't forewarn the soldiers and tell them, be at such and such a house at evening tonight and you'll be able to arrest Jesus without the crowds around. Judas didn't know where this meal was going to be. Jesus organized it, shrouded in mystery, to keep Judas from having him arrested earlier. You see what happened? Jesus sent 2 disciples to get a secret room ready there. So he sent 2 of his disciples, telling them, go into the city. The Passover had to be celebrated in Jerusalem. Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house he enters, the teacher asks, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? He will show you a large upper room up on top of the roof, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there. It was all shrouded in mystery. Judas had no idea where this was going to be. He had no idea who the man they would meet in the city was, nor the house that he would take them to prepare the Passover meal. So Judas couldn't have Jesus Christ arrested until Judas went and found out where the meal was going to be. It may well have been the house of John Mark. And it may well be that at that meal, Judas left, went and told the soldiers. And the soldiers came back to that house. But Jesus had already gone to the Garden of Gethsemane. So John Mark, who was in that house, when he realized the soldiers were coming to arrest Jesus, and the soldiers had gone on to Gethsemane because Judas knew where Jesus spent the night, that John Mark put his sheet around him because he was in bed, jumped out of the window, and ran to the Garden of Gethsemane to warn Jesus' disciples. But the soldiers got there first, and they grabbed a young man wearing nothing but a sheet, Mark tells us, and he ran away naked. And we'll get to that in chapter 15, and that may well have been Mark himself. But anyhow, Jesus had this secret sign for his 2 disciples. Luke tells us that they were Peter and John, who went into the city to see a man carrying a water jar. It's a bit like saying, look, I'll meet you at Paddington Station and I'll be wearing a pink carnation. What happens if everybody's wearing pink carnations? Well, thankfully, not everybody does wear pink carnations. And in Jesus' day, men carried wineskins and women carried water jars. So to be met by a man carrying a water jar, they realized that this was the right guy. He took them to the room so Jesus could celebrate this Passover, and Judas couldn't stop it happening. It was a symbolic meal that Jesus wanted to celebrate with his disciples, but also Jesus wanted to eat this meal because he was going to transform the Passover meal. And that's why when we have the communion laid like this, it's very, very different from the Passover meal, isn't it? There's no lamb. The lamb was fulfilled. There's no need for lambs to be sacrificed any longer. The only symbols that we have are the bread and the wine. Jesus transformed this Passover ritual, showed that he had fulfilled so much. And now all we have to do in remembrance of him is take the bread and drink the wine. And Christians celebrate this meal. The Jews celebrated it every Passover time, the 13th, 14th of Nisan. But we don't celebrate it once a year, do we? How often should we celebrate the Lord's Supper, take the bread and the wine? The Bible tells us, as often as you meet together. What does that mean? Well, it means on Sundays when we meet together. We meet together on Sundays, and we should remember the Lord's death every Sunday. Indeed, if you read in Acts chapter 20 and verse 7, that on the first day of the week they met together to break bread. Now, we celebrate the communion service every other Sunday, don't we? So we're not quite as good as we should be. And I was wondering why this is. And I think it goes back into the Middle Ages, where people were confusing the Lord's Supper with the Passover, which was once a year. And when the Reformation came along, the leaders of the Reformation wanted to celebrate the communion every week, but the governing authorities put pressure on them, said they can't. And so they could only celebrate communion maybe twice, maybe 4 times a year. And this tradition has carried down in Presbyterian churches today. Up in Scotland, they'll have communion seasons, and they'll just take communion, about 4 times a year. Well, that's the reason that the tradition has happened. But I think biblically we should, as often as we meet together, every Sunday when the church gathers together, we should remember the Lord's death, because it's so important. And if you find it difficult to get to church, you must make sure you do your best to get there when there's going to be a communion service, so that you can take the bread and the wine with other brothers and sisters in Christ. It's important. Our problem is that we have made it just 10 minutes at the end of the service, and it seems to be, pretty insignificant. Oh, it's communion today. That means it's going to be a bit late. And we shouldn't think like that at all. It's important. It was so important that Jesus went through all this rigmarole to make sure that he celebrated it with his disciples. It's important. Not only that, but the next section, verses 17 to 21, tells us that we shouldn't only take the communion, eat the bread and the wine, but we must eat with humility. Eating with humility is important. The trouble is, we tend to only take communion when we're feeling a little bit self-righteous. Oh, I've been good this week, I'll take communion. And I haven't been good this week, I better not take communion. And we tend to eat it with a little bit of pride. Reminds me of the story of the people who had been taken around Beethoven's house. And their guide was taking them around and showed them Beethoven's piano. And a lady pushed her way through the crowd, and she went away, and she lifted up the lid of the piano, and she started to play the Moonlight Sonata. It was pretty good. And the guide went up to her, and she said, I'm sure you have lots of people who want to play this piece of music on Beethoven's piano, don't you? He said, well, madam, we did have Paderewski here last year, and they asked him if he would play some Beethoven. And he said that he wasn't worthy to play on Beethoven's piano. And he closed the lid. And sometimes we need to realize we're not worthy. We're not worthy to handle holy things. We're not worthy to eat the bread and the wine. We don't take it because we are worthy. We've got to take it with humility. We are totally unworthy of these things. And Jesus makes his disciples humble. He tells them that one of them is going to betray him. Now, why didn't he simply say, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, Judas is going to betray me? They would have jumped on him. They were big, burly fishermen. They would have got him. Peter would have got him around the neck, and John would have got his arms behind his back, and Andrew would have been tying his legs together, and Judas would have been screaming, so they would have gagged him, and Judas would have been struggling, so Philip would have hit him on the head with a bowl, and then they would have had him. They would have taken him, and they would have taken him down to the boat, and they would sail out to a big ship, and they would put him on the boat for Spain, and when he came round, he would be lost in the Mediterranean somewhere. And that would have solved all their problems. Why didn't Jesus say, Judas is going to betray me? They asked him who it was. And do you know what he said? One of the 12. One of those eating with me at the meal will betray me. You see, Jesus doesn't want them to feel good about themselves. Judas is going to betray me. I knew it wouldn't be me, said Andrew. I knew I was all right. I knew it wouldn't be Peter as well. He's my brother. We're good guys. Knew it wouldn't be me. No, not like that at all. Jesus says, one of you is going to betray me. And they all, instead of pointing the finger at others, have to examine themselves. Me? Could it be me? I hope it's not me. But I know how weak I am. I know how sinful I am. I know how vulnerable I am. And Jesus wants his disciples to share the horror of betrayal at the meal. One of his 12 disciples will betray him. One of those who eats with him. One of those who dips the bread in the wine with him will betray him. We've got to eat it with humility, and this requires two things. It requires that we recognize each other as friends. This is very important. When we take the communion, we are eating together. The early church would eat together at a meal. It would be a love feast. And they would all come along, and either the host would put on food or they'd all bring it together, and then as they were eating the meal, they would go into taking the bread and breaking it and the wine and sharing it around. And in the context of a meal, remember the significance of eating a meal together. In the context of a meal, they would eat the bread and drink the wine. But unfortunately, pretty soon abuses came along. And the slaves who could only get there late after work would be late and find that the wealthy had got there early and eaten everything. Not only had they eaten everything, but they'd drunk their wine as well and were a bit tipsy. So when it came to take the communion, at the end of the meal, there were some who were full up and a bit drunk, and there were others who had nothing. And it was causing divisions in the church. So that which was meant to be communion had become com-division. And so the early church decided after a while to stop having these love feasts. And let's make it straightforward, so everybody has exactly the same. We all have the same amount of bread, all have the same amount of wine. Just a little bit. Let's get rid of the abuses and make it meaningful. Let's make sure that the significance isn't destroyed. But it's a meal. That's what we've got to remember. When we take communion, we're taking it as a family eating a meal together. We're in fellowship together. My dad died in tragic circumstances when I was a young teenager. My mum was left with 6 kids. She'd never signed a check in her life and was completely bankrupt. And she fought tooth and nail to save her family. And she did a wonderful job, except for maybe with me. But she fought for the family because they were her family. Take Caroline's mum, married to a drunken miner who drank all his money, and she fought tooth and nail for her family, getting one to university in Bristol, another into Sandhurst, and others, because it was her family. And Jesus says, look, when you're taking communion, this is your family. You have to fight tooth and nail for your family. Someone's struggling, you who are spiritual, restore them gently. Someone's, the theology isn't perfect. Well, don't reject them. Accept him whose faith is weak. This is your family. You're eating together as family. Do you understand the significance of this? It's not a little bit of bread and a little bit of wine. It's you and Christ. It's Christ gives you the bread and the wine that's his body to eat as his family. We are community in union. We must recognize each other, and we must not forget to examine ourselves. We have seen so many fall away, haven't we? There are those who may have been sitting beside us 10 years ago taking communion, who now wouldn't be seen dead in a place of worship. There are those who we respected, who have fallen away. And if they have made shipwreck of their faith, maybe we will too. It's true, isn't it? Are we stronger than the devil? Are we without sin? Are we perfect? Look how we failed Jesus Christ in the past week. Look how we've denied him. Look how we failed him. And what are we going to do in this next week? Where will we be in the future? And we say, Lord, help me. Don't let it be me. Keep me so that I do not fail you, deny you, betray you, let you down. And we don't eat because we're good. We eat because we're weak. And we know that we need to be remembering him, close to him, in his family. And we eat with humility. You know, if we ever feel, I'm good, I can take communion, we're wrong. If you ever feel I'm bad, I shouldn't take communion, you're right. We eat with humility. And then finally, we need to eat with understanding. Eating with understanding is vital. You see, bread and wine are not medicines. It's not you eat a little bit and you drink a little bit and it makes you better. It's not a medicine. It's not like that at all. It is not literally Jesus Christ's blood. There's been down through the ages the horrific teaching that the bread and the wine is magically changed and it becomes Jesus' body. And when Jesus said, "This is my body," he meant this is literally my body. But of course he didn't. Because he says in verse 25, "I will not drink of the fruit of the vine again." He knows that the wine, which is his blood, is not literally his blood. It is literally the fruit of the vine. It isn't magically changed. There's not something magical that you eat the bread and you drink the wine. It makes you spiritual. It's because you understand what the symbols point to that it does you good. It's only the understanding that helps you to benefit from it. So talking about persecuted Christians, on the 16th of October, 1555, Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley were taken out. They were tied back to back outside Balliol College in Oxford. And they said, Latimer said, "Mr. Ridley, play the man. Let us light a candle in England today, which by God's grace will never go out." And they were burned to death at the stake. And Nicholas Ridley suffered horrifically in the fire. But why was he being burned at the stake? Because he said that the body and blood of Jesus Christ are not literally changed into his flesh and his blood, but they are symbols that represent it. And people were so hostile to that. They wanted it to be magical, that they had him burned at the stake. But you know, it's not magical. It's symbolic. And we need to know what they mean. And this raises the question as to whether little children should take communion. It's a big question, isn't it? Can little children take communion? Because if they don't understand it, maybe in their childish way they put their faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. But if they don't understand it, then it's of no benefit. So I say, if you have little children who want to take communion, well, you should talk to them and make sure they understand this. And as parents, take responsibility to make sure that your children just don't go through a meaningless ritual. And if they are under 14, well, suggest that they come and chat to me about these things so that I can talk to them. Because we must eat and drink with understanding. What do these symbols mean? Verse 22, the body. Not the flesh, the body. Jesus said, "This is my body." And It's a different word from flesh. Body means your whole being, your whole soul. And Jesus Christ gave himself, and he broke the bread. It's very interesting that when he fed the 5,000, exactly the same thing in Mark chapter 6, he took the bread, gave thanks, and broke it and distributed it to the crowds. In the feeding of the 4,000 in chapter 7 or 8, he took the bread, he broke it and distributed it, exactly the same. And on the road to Emmaus, when Jesus Christ had risen from the dead, and he was with Clopas and the other person, and they were in the inn, and Jesus took bread and he broke it. And when he broke it, their eyes were open. They said, it's Jesus. And I wonder whether when Jesus took the bread, he didn't break it viciously like this, because it's a picture of his body being broken on the cross. Jesus Christ being killed. Jesus Christ dying for us. And Jesus Christ was broken. He died. And the bread is given to us because we benefit from his death. Without his death, we couldn't live. Just as without eating bread, we can't live. So without his death, we couldn't live. We need him for our life. He died, paying the wages of sin, which is death, for us. That's the meaning of the bread, his body, the wine, his blood. He took one cup. They all had their cups, but he took one cup. They could have all drank their own cup, but no, he just had one cup. Picture of unity, this fellowship, this commitment together. And he said, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many." The new covenant, that's what the blood means. When I was at school, blazer, new blazer, my brother's old one, sent to the cleaners. My mum stitched up the pockets, put a patch over the elbows, and said, "I've got you a new blazer." It wasn't new at all. It was just an old one patched up. The new covenant in Jesus Christ's blood is not the old covenant patched up. It's like a last will and testament. So I write my will that I'm going to leave all my wealth to Dave Smith. And then after a few months, I write out another will, a last will and testament, that I'm going to leave it all to my wife and children. So the first will is obsolete, isn't it? It's replaced by a second will. And I die, poisoned at staff meal. And Dave Smith comes along and says, "I got the old will." Caroline says, "Yes, but I got the new one." "Well, let's mix them together and have a bit of both, shall we? Have half each." And Caroline says, "Forget it. On your bike." Your will is obsolete. I've got the new will. And the old will, the old covenant, which required our total obedience, is replaced by the new covenant provided by Jesus Christ's total obedience. And it is so good that we find it hard to grasp, so we have to read Galatians, 2 Corinthians, Hebrews, and soak ourselves in the glory of the new covenant. The old covenant was glorious, but the new covenant is glorious by far. That's what the wine means. And the meal, well, Jesus says at the end, "I tell you the truth, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." So the Apostle Paul tells us we eat and drink until Christ comes. You see, it's not the end. It's the new stage on the way to glory. The bread tells us that the wages of sin has been paid for. The wine tells us that we're in the new covenant. And the meal tells us we'll eat one day in heaven. Until then, let's eat together in unity, in humility, remembering him. Well, we'll go straight into our communion service after we have sung the hymn, "From heaven you came, helpless babe, entered our world, your glory veiled. This is our God, the servant King." Let's stand and sing together.